Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see a great turnout. It's really good to see everyone interested in getting some tips for thesis writing, especially considering the time of the semester. My name is Kennedy Weaver. I am a graduate assistant for the IEPY Graduate Office and Graduate Mentoring Center. And I would like to welcome Dr. Brooks Gillis and Nathan Markham from the University Writing Center. They're going to be presenting today on the topic of getting started with thesis writing. So we're very excited to have them, and I will turn it over to them for today's presentation.
Thank you, Kennedy. Great to be here. So I'm Dr. Brooks Gillies. You can also just call me Marilee. That is fine. And I'm happy to see you all here this afternoon. It's a very cold day, so I do hope everybody is staying warm. So I direct the Writing Center on campus. I have virtually added a photo of one of our locations behind me here, so you can see it's a friendly place. So along the way, we'll be talking a lot about our the center as well, so you can get more support one-to-one or in groups. So lots of different things that we'll be talking about, but really just want to give you a sense of different tips that might be useful as you embark on this somewhat stressful journey, and want to make you feel more confident and excited about writing. So Nathan is with me here today, and he will be doing most of the talking. So we're gonna share a screen in a second and kind of walk you through some tips and talk a little bit about additional programming that might be useful to you as you continue through thesis writing.
All right, can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. I'm happy to be here. I'm also a graduate student who is at the beginning stages of my thesis. And I've worked with graduate students for years, thought really deeply about this process. So I'm excited to be here, both as somebody who studies writing and as somebody who is writing a thesis. Go ahead and share my screen. All right, so obviously we aren't going to be able to cover everything that you'll ever need to know about writing your thesis in 1 hour. However, I'm hoping that today will help provide a good jumping off point and get everybody thinking a little bit more in depth about everything that writing a thesis will entail, both like when it's just you and your computer and your writing and all of the various life things that surround being a graduate student. Before we dive into all the thesis things, I want to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do at the Writing Center. So at the Writing Center, we take a peer consultant approach, which means that everyone that you work with in the Writing Center will also be students embarking on their own writing journeys. Writing Center Studies is its own discipline. We all undergo the same training course to support our writers. It's not really possible to be experts on writing, broadly speaking, because writing is so genre and context specific. But I like to think that we are really great at reading other people's work and providing thorough feedback and knowing the right kinds of questions to ask. So don't feel like you have to have something wrong with your writing to come in to us. I always make it clear to everybody that Writing Center consultants schedule appointments with each other all the time. In fact, one of my coworkers scheduled with me just earlier today. So anything I'm going to talk about related to writing, no matter what stage of the writing process you might be in, definitely feel free to schedule an appointment and come talk to us. In addition to the one-to-one support that we offer, we also have all sorts of fun events that we'll talk more about today. We have some right on-site events where groups of people gather either in person in one of our locations or on Zoom just to sit together and get some writing done and be accountable to each other for having that writing time. We also have some programming focused on more specific writing related concerns. So pretty much any question you might have about writing, we will be able to support you with in some way, even if that thing that we can do to support you is helping you figure out what questions you need to ask an advisor. So definitely, if any writing related concern you might run into, anything you want to learn more about, come see us. Okay, So obviously, I'll talk a little bit more about what we do throughout today's presentation, but let's dive into our first tip. Your thesis is a big part of your semester, but it definitely is not all of your semester. I'm certain that you probably have other classes, other research that you might be balancing alongside of it, and also you're a person with a life outside of just being in school. And writing your thesis requires a balance between all of these things. I think the first step to figuring out how to balance all of these things is to know how to break your thesis down into small, manageable, bite-sized pieces rather than it just being, the thesis, the big thing that occupies your brain all the time. We talk a lot about SMART goals in the Writing Center. Marilee loves to happy set SMART goals. And this might seem like just another acronym, so I'm going to try to break it down in terms of being in this very beginning stage of the thesis writing process, which I think a lot of us like to start with an annotated bibliography. So if you're going to set a specific goal about something like an annotated bibliography, don't just tell yourself, finish this bibliography by the end of the month. You might separate it out by topic and or section, think about how much detail you want to go into for each source, depending on how long each source was, how much you want to take from it. For a goal to be measurable, you want to be able to think about like how many annotations you want to get done in a certain amount of time, or how long you want to sit and write for. I'm definitely one of those people. I do better with like time related things rather than I say, okay, I'm going to sit down and write as much as I can for 2 hours. Then there are other times when I like to limit myself in terms of like, I'm going to get these annotations done and I'm not going to spend too much time spinning my wheels. I'm just going to get them done. So however it works for you to think about it being measurable.
Yeah, so you wouldn't want to say, I mean, you can try this, but we've all been there where you say, I'm going to write this entire chapter this week. And that can happen and it might work, but it might not. And you might end up feeling worse than you did before. So if you give yourself a little bit of wiggle room, but still have that larger goal for the whole week, but say, I'm going to spend at least 30 minutes each day writing, and here are the ways that I'm breaking up this task. So maybe you have subsections you're planning for the chapter. Maybe you're going to review data one day, those types of things. So thinking about how can you break this task up into meaningful chunks that make it more doable and more possible. And that way too, I don't know how you all feel about this, but if you have that same to-do item on your list every day, it starts to feel like you're not making progress, even though you are. So if you have write chapter or work on chapter every day, it might be nice if you have this kind of category of work on this part of the chapter, or get a certain number of words. So kind of play with ideas for how you want to make those SMART goals for yourself, but do think about what might work for you and try different things. This is also a time when a lot of folks might have writing processes that really work for them previously, and then you hit some sort of wall sometimes in these big projects. So it's also useful to just be ready for that. So not to panic or get too worried that, oh no, I don't even know how to write at all anymore, even though I used to feel pretty good at this. So being able to try out and engage in new strategies might be helpful.
Absolutely. That brings us into the next one, achievable. When I do Write On-Site programming, I ask people to set a goal that they can accomplish within 2 hours. And then when they tell me the goal that they've set for themselves, I say, awesome, let's reduce that goal by about a third. If you are constantly setting goals that take a lot of time and emotional effort to achieve, then you're just barely hitting the mark, then you're going to get discouraged really quickly. But if you set a goal that you want to achieve and then you reduce it a little bit, worst case scenario, you hit your goal. Best case scenario, you accomplish more than your goal. Either way, you feel satisfied and more motivated to continue working consistently. So relevance, I am the kind of person, I get really caught up in the details of things and trying to make them perfect when they don't necessarily need to be perfect. Like if I'm annotating something that I'm going to use later and it's pretty much just for my eyes only, it doesn't have to be like perfectly chiseled little paragraph. So I have to take a step back and think, okay, how relevant is this going to be to the larger picture of my thesis? Like, how much is it going to matter when I'm looking back at this source in 2 or 3 months to have this sentence be exactly right? Do I just need to move on and spend my time somewhere that's going to be more productive? Or is this actually a good thing to do? And then time bound, we kind of talked about this one already, but just being aware of the limitations of everything you have going on your own week. Like, I can tell myself that I want to work on my thesis for, say, like an hour every day. And there are going to be some days where that just isn't going to happen. If I've got classes and work all day and I get home and it's like 7 o'clock and I haven't eaten, maybe I can spare 15 minutes to look at that thesis, but I'm probably not going to be able to give myself an hour. So making sure that you're setting goals that are reasonable within the confines of how much time you have in a specific day, a week, a semester.
Yeah, and this overlaps with the achievable, right? So I love that idea Nathan just shared about having a large goal for yourself and then cutting it back a tiny bit and then making that a little bit more achievable because of those time-bound ways that we organize our time that sometimes get disrupted, right, for whatever reason. So, but having those goals that I'm going to write at least 30 minutes a day, but then maybe some days it's 15. But you're looking at that project frequently, and you're making time and you're thinking about a lot, which will overlap with some of our other tips.
Right. Give yourself space to be a person, basically. It's part of setting goals that will work with your thesis is understanding your own writing process. It's another thing that I often tell people when they come to the Write On site is to make sure that when they set a goal that they want to achieve, that they're understanding where they are in the writing process. So someone says, oh, I want to finish this section of my thesis today. Say, okay, that's awesome. What part of the writing process are you in? Like when you say finish it, do you mean finish drafting it? Or do you mean like finish proofreading a thing that you've already written and like expand on a few points? What does it mean to finish it? Because the writing process is messy and recursive, and it's not this straight line that I think so many of us have been taught to conceive of it as. Like you might think that the jump from, for example, researching to writing your thesis is direct, but sometimes you won't realize you need more information about something until you've already started writing. I'll say, oh, I need another source here. I'm going to go back and research. That doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It just means that that writing process is a little bit messier than we like to give ourselves credit for. So if you are building space for that messiness into the way that you set goals for yourself, I think that it'll help you be more compassionate with yourself, more realistic, and more consistent in hitting your own goals.
You might have noticed I've been sharing some resources in the chat, and one I just shared is a link to a YouTube video of our writing process workshop at the Writing Center. So this is one that you can do in a self-guided way that gets at some of the things that Nathan was just talking about. We also are going to do in-person versions of this. So if you'd prefer to do this in a way where you get to interact with other writers, that'll be coming up through our Write Stuff workshop series, which Nathan just shifted the slide for us so you can see that. But yes, considering writing process is really important because your process isn't always going to be the same. And I think something that happens with a big project like a thesis is that it's much longer than a lot of things that you've probably written in the past. And so it's also important to consider how your process will have to change. This isn't something that is as easy to binge write as perhaps other writing in your life has been, even though that can always be a bit of a trial too. I remember being a grad student and there were seminar papers that were definitely written in less time than I should have. So, thinking about being able to collect resources and having time to write, and then thinking about how all the chapters connect, it is a very big project. And so writing processes that have worked for you in the past might start to break down here. And so it can be useful just to look at your habits and look at what you're choosing to do and which things are really helpful to you and which things get in the way. And also recognize the difference between procrastination and sometimes you really just do need a break, or you need to kind of let a piece of writing go for a second because you kind of hit a wall for the day. So giving yourself time to, like Nathan says, be a person. So maybe doing something like getting some housework done or going on a walk can actually be really generative and isn't always procrastination, and try not to beat yourself up over that. So mapping your process can help you get a kind of better handle on that for yourself.
I think that we tend to define writing really narrowly. Like a lot of people think that if you're not actively sitting down at your computer with a notebook, producing content, that's not part of your writing process. And that's not true. Like Marilee said, taking a step back from it, doing some household chores or going for a walk, calling a friend, these are all things that can factor into the way that we process. So part of the writing process, go ahead, Marilee.
I was just going to say, not that any of you have time for this, but if you're interested in reading more theory on the creative process, an interesting take is by Holly Csikszentmihalyi, who's a psychologist who has written about creativity and the state of flow, and talks about how semi-automatic tasks can actually help you be creative. So sometimes taking a break and washing the dishes or going on a walk or driving somewhere, those kinds of things that don't use a lot of concentration can really help you have creative thoughts. So sometimes taking a break can help. So thinking about that, and that also, this might resonate with some of you. A lot of people have very good ideas in the shower.
Yeah, I definitely do. My roommate is not amused by my bathroom notebook. Yeah, there's a reason that's a cliche. They're like random good idea in the shower for the writer. It's the rote task. Also, I want to mention that the writing process workshop for the Write Stuff series is great. If you want to interrogate the writing process more through the lens of like being a graduate student writing a long form writing project, Navigating Graduate Writing Workshop is really great for this, and it gives you a chance to connect with other graduate students. So that would be the second session, the writing processes and strategies for academic writing. All right, so tip 2, connected with the first tip, plan your semester. This is also something we'll talk about in that Navigating Graduate Writing Workshop, so a little bit more in that the first session of it. Obviously, we can't go as in depth here as we will in that workshop, but we'll hope to give you some pointers that'll prove to be helpful. Like I mentioned before, your thesis is a big part of your semester, but it isn't all of your semester. Like I know that I personally this semester have also committed to a couple articles and a couple conference presentations and another class. And so while my thesis is sort of semi-constantly in my mind, it's not the only thing that I have to get done. So planning all the things surrounding your thesis can help you to figure out how to actually break your thesis down into a way that'll be useful for you. I think the first step is to update your degree map to include your thesis work, which we talked about. Being able to break your thesis itself down into smaller goals will help you do this. Even if you already have your courses mapped out, go ahead and add how you want to get your thesis done into that existing degree map, and any other academic things that you're doing, conferences, publications, and the likes. Also, get organized. This one's my kryptonite. I am not naturally an organized person, but if you can find a system of note-taking and organizing your research from the beginning of your thesis writing process and maintain that consistently throughout your semester, then you'll be in a much better spot when you get a little bit deeper into actually producing your thesis. Reading the thing, you know, when you read something, you think that you're going to remember it because it's so fresh and vivid in your mind, and then you read another book and a week later it's gone. So if you want to actually be able to access the information that you took the time to gain, active reading, highlighting, note-taking, saving those things and organizing them in a way that works for you is absolutely key. I definitely suggest saving these notes in a cloud-based storage service so that you can access it from anywhere, and also so that you don't lose it. I also personally back it up on a flash drive as well as the cloud, just in case Google does something. Definitely organize your notes and make sure that they're definitely saved safely. So we've talked a little bit about this, about trying to interact with your thesis as often as you can. But I think it's important to not feel like you have to have time to sit and write for multiple hours at a time for a contribution to your thesis to be useful or meaningful. There's a book called Writing Your Dissertation in 15 Minutes a Day, which sort of a gimmicky title, right? Like the author clarifies in the beginning of the book that they don't really expect you to be able to write your entire project in 15 minutes a day. But the idea is that if you commit to 15 minutes a day, some days you might only give that 15 minutes, and other days you get 15 minutes in and you realize you have more to say than you thought you did, and giving 30 minutes or an hour. And you don't always have to commit to that 30 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, but if you can commit to 15 minutes a day, it will make it easier for you to jump back into it from day to day. And you might find that you have more to give your thesis than you initially thought you did when you started.
Yes, but also remember to take days off. So think about it like a work week. So there are 5 days that you need to be touching that thesis, but you should also take time for yourself, because otherwise it might make the project harder for you if you're not taking space for other things.
Absolutely. Yes, at some point you have to stop interacting with it. Okay. Set boundaries around your writing time. So boundaries around your writing time, both so that you have the time that you need to actually write the thing you want to write, and boundaries so that you can relax and have some time when you know that you don't need to be writing at this particular moment. If you can treat scheduled weekly writing time the same way you would an external commitment, that can be really helpful. Let your writing time be sacred. I know that can be really difficult with, say, you set that block aside on your schedule, and you know the person who made that commitment, and they're kind of a pushover. It's always the issue I have with myself. But if you can maintain those boundaries, get in the habit of doing that early on in your thesis writing process, it makes it easier to protect that time as you get more into the weeds. Also, not really useful to try to make yourself write for more than 2 hours at a time without a break. I sometimes will get really into it and want to sit with it longer than that, and that's fine. But we're not actually very productive for more than 2-hour stints. I like the Pomodoro method, where you take, my gosh, is it like, I'm trying to remember what the
25 minutes. So you do
25.
25 minutes, then you take a 5-minute break, another 25 5-minute breaks. You do that, I think, 3 times. I posted a Wikipedia article about it, and in the chat, I also mentioned there were lots of apps designed around this premise, but you can also just set a timer on your phone and then give yourself a quick break to, like, go, I don't know, make a cup of tea. That's my favorite thing to do, but kind of move around a little bit and come back to it.
I totally forgot that it was 25 because I tend to run in 45 minutes into the 15-minute break. So there's definitely different variations on this that you can try, whatever works best for your brain.
Absolutely. And I see Megan has shared an app recommendation. Everybody feel free to share your favorite tools in here too. That's great. Sorry, Nathan.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I tend to do this method with groups of other people in a Discord server. So we'll have a certain amount of time on and then off and chat in between. And that works really well for me. Kind of gives me the chance to feel like I'm more accountable to being there because I'm also interacting with other people. Which brings us to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is building a robust writing community. It can feel really lonely to be embarking on this giant writing project that's likely unlike anything you've done before, without being able to look around and see other classmates doing the same things. So it can be really important at this stage to form robust writing communities, talk to your classmates, talk to grad students outside of your field. Don't feel like the people that you write with necessarily have to be in your same discipline to be helpful. We have a space that we've created to foster this kind of connection. The Write Space Place event is a drop-in writing event for writers who are in any stage of the writing process. So the Write Place event happens in person in Kavanaugh every Tuesday and Thursday, and the Write Space, yes, the one behind Merrily, the Write Space happens in Zoom on Wednesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. So you can come to as many of those as you think would be useful for you. I know there was a group of people who came consistently over the last couple of semesters who even started meeting outside of those weekly times as well, because they found like so much value in connecting with each other. Also, you can use this for things that aren't your thesis as well. Like, I think it was Megan who's here. Hi, Megan, who for one semester would dedicate one of the days to more long form thesis driven work and the other day to short response papers and the other sorts of writing around that are like different from the thesis, but still connected in small ways. So however this writing time would work best for you, it gives you a space to meet other people, talk through writing related difficulties you might be having, and also gives it a really easy way to build it into your calendar. Like you don't just have to treat your own writing time like it's an external commitment, because it is an external commitment. I want to reiterate that writing does not have to be lonely. I think that we're all sold this vision of like the Henry David Thoreau alone in his cabin in the woods. But even Henry David Thoreau did not do this alone. His mother was doing his laundry. He had support. He just didn't talk about it. No one is writing in a vacuum. You're always interacting with other people. And while talking to people, your discipline can be really, really useful. People don't even have to be in school with you in any capacity for you to benefit from talking through your writing with them or just talking about it. Definitely don't feel like you have to be alone in this. There's a lot of people who are doing the exact same kind of work you are. In addition to the like right on site writing accountability sort of support, graduate writing groups can be really useful. The Writing Center has facilitated some in the past. We don't have any going right now, but we are 100% happy to help people initiate a graduate writing group. We've got resources and advice. So if you've got a group of like 3 to 5 people that are interested in providing focused feedback on writing on like a weekly basis, and you would like some support getting this off the ground, definitely feel free to send us an email, reach out to us, and we would gladly support this.
Yeah, and to pipe in a little bit further too, so as Nathan's been sharing, there's a lot of different ways to encourage community and accountability throughout the thesis writing process. So for some of you, more interaction with other writers, so coming to a right place where you get to be with other people, or online where you're at the same time you're writing in the right space, can be great. If you're looking for actual more generative and long form feedback, a writing group might be a good fit. Sometimes you just want to check in. So you might have an accountability partner you check in with every couple of days or once a week. So there's lots of ways to do this. And if these feel too time consuming, do also feel free to reach out to the center or make an appointment and interact with us. And we can kind of give you some advice based on the kind of real, boundaries that you already have in place or things that you need to be able to make time for. But there's just lots of different ways that you can still get a little bit of support from other people. And one of those is also one-to-one sessions at the center. So you can control the time around those a little bit more easily too. So yeah, lots of ways to not be so alone in the process. Like when I was writing my thesis, I had a friend who also was writing hers, and we would just call and vent to each other once a week. So we just pretty much complain about the process, but it was very helpful to us. So, all these small things do make a difference.
Absolutely. And especially since these are somewhat unique times to be in graduate school and writing a thesis, definitely use technology to connect. We are offering in-person events, but I know that that's not always a thing that's possible. And also, like if you're not feeling well but still would like to connect with people, these can be really great platforms to use to connect with others. Slack and Discord, you can add like different text channels and like have a voice channel and use it to store resources. So many different ways to connect. You can also do the more classic approach of having like a shared Google Drive folder with people that you give asynchronous feedback on. There's so many different ways to engage without necessarily having to be face-to-face. All right. And then our last tip today, use productivity tools to keep yourself on track. There isn't one correct way to do this. There's not, I can't hand you one tool that's going to work for you 100%. But here are some ideas that might help you find the tools that will best support you. As great as technology can be to keep us connected and organize our things, it can be really overwhelming, especially if you have a job that requires that you're on a computer a lot, and then you're writing your thesis on a computer and it's just endless. So maybe try, if you are just wanting to work on your thesis but not wanting to stare at a screen for any longer, you can try free writing through something with a paper and pencil. You can try printing your drafts and your research out so you can interact with it in a way that isn't screen centric. We've talked about a lot of great ways to plan and organize that use technology, but also paper planners and Post-its, whatever systems that you might have already had for writing before digital technology became more central are still completely valid ways to engage. So don't feel like you have to be 100% immersed in digital technology at all times. I haven't actually tried the Forest app yet, but I have a coworker who swears by it for making sure that you can have your writing time without being constantly accessible. I think that can be a really difficult thing in trying to protect your writing time, is your phone can still go off. So if you silence it and make yourself actually be present with your writing and your research, that can help a ton in making your time feel like your own.
I'll also add that using, like print copies of things can be really helpful at some points in the writing process. So sometimes you'll have a chapter that you have written, but you're feeling like maybe it's disorganized and you're moving things around on the screen and it's not really helping you. So you might choose to print it off and cut up sections and rearrange it. And it sounds very old school, but it can be very useful. So feel free to indulge in those techniques. That there's nothing bad about your writing to do that it can be very helpful.
Yeah, I had one of my fellow writing center people who's already graduated, wrote her thesis successfully, survived the process. I remember I came into work one day and she was just sitting on the floor with paper everywhere. I came in an hour early. I was shocked to see her there with all this paper. But by the end of it, she had completely reorganized the chapter and was feeling much better about it. So that's an image I go back to a lot if I am worried that I'm not engaging with my writing correctly, just to remember how messy it can and honestly should be. Also, digital technology is not the enemy. Yes, it's easy to get tired of the screen, but there are some digital tools that can help you to jumpstart your writing. Programs like Write or Die and Written Kitten can help you break out a writer's block if you're just so tired of staring at that blank screen. Write or Die makes you write a certain number of words per minute, or it starts erasing your writing. So it's stressful, but it makes you definitely get words on the page. Definitely wouldn't risk putting anything in there you don't want to lose, but it can be useful for making yourself actually sit down and get started. Written Kitten is sort of like the good twin of Write or Die, in that you write a certain number of words and it shows you a picture of a kitten. So whichever works best for you, or some combination thereof. One thing that's helped me a lot is having the Google Docs app downloaded on my phone, so that if I have a thought about my thesis, or I thought about a reading that I just finished that's going to contribute toward my thesis, I can open that document and make that note right away. And then later, when I sit down at my computer, when I actually have more time to write, that note is already right there and it's in the correct spot and I can't lose it. And I can just expand on it right there. Other things that can help: recording yourself talking. So if it feels very clear in your head, and then when you sit down to actually write, it just goes fuzzy, try recording yourself on your computer or your phone, and then listening to what you've said and writing that down. And then finally, when you're interacting with your research, as great as it can be to print it out and get away from the screen sometimes, recording your notes digitally means that you've got access to those quotes and the like your thoughts about what you've read. You have those things already in the digital format, so they can transfer more directly into your writing. So there isn't one correct way to take notes or to research. And I think that especially in the early stages of writing your thesis, it is totally okay to experiment and see what things work best for you.
So we have a few wrap up points, but we wanted to check in with you all first to get a sense of these questions, which, sorry, we didn't get a chance to share them with you before the breakout room. So one of those Zoom things that happens. So we're curious in hearing a little bit about, how you're feeling about moving in through the thesis process, and then also what things you are excited about trying out, and maybe any questions you have that you think we can help you with as a general group. And yeah, so I guess we just have a few minutes for that. Anyone have anything to share? And feel free to share in the chat as well.
Especially if there was something that you were wanting more support with, or were particularly unsure about, that you wanted to bring up in this time that we have together. So obviously also feel free to schedule with us.
Well, number 2, the area of the writing process that trips me up. I've been in revisions for a long time. So, at a point you're like, just, you revise it, then you revise it, then you revise it again. And then, so that's just been an area that I've been in. It's just a struggle, but I think that's all part of it. So.
I think it's hard because with writing, there's not really a definitive end process. Like I talked to one of my professors last semester who was telling me about all the edits she wished that she could make to a thing that she published like 10 years ago. So at some point, you just have to stop revising and make peace with the fact that it'll always be imperfect in some way. I think that can be really hard to navigate, like what actually needs to change and how much of it is just I've been looking at this piece of writing for too long. This is where making an appointment with the Writing Center can be really useful, because you can come in and talk to somebody one-to-one about it and ask all the nagging little questions to see like what sounds off to somebody else versus what's just you've been looking at it too long, and what discipline specific things you need to keep in mind. Hopefully that's information you can get from your advisor or somebody on your committee.
Yeah, well, that's another thing that I was going to suggest, is that sometimes, as someone who also is on several thesis committees, I might give different feedback to similar writing on different days. So if you're getting kind of mixed feedback from folks who are on your committee, it can be helpful to, like, after a meeting where you've talked about your writing or after you've received feedback, to send a clarifying message that says, based on our conversation today, here are my priorities in revision, or based on your written feedback, or based on like the kind of feedback I've gotten from multiple members of the committee, again, depending on how those interactions tend to be structured within your committee and within your department. Then you kind of get a sense like, here's like my list of 3 to 5 things that I'm doing to make sure that you're in agreement, because we've all been in meetings where we hear different things or prioritize different things. And so that way, too, if they give you different suggestions that ask you to change things that you had a different way before, that is now they want it that way again, you can say, oh, well, last time we talked about this, right? And you can point back to that interaction. Not thinking that anybody has ill intentions here, just we all get caught up in our ideas. And there's a lot of ways to write a big project like this. So that can be helpful. And that's another thing that outside readers can sometimes give you support with as well, in thinking about questions that you can pose back to members of your committee.
Also looking at the chat, and Sherry was talking about having a hard time with organizing, and within that, selecting which ideas to include. They all tie together most strongly. Sorting and organizing many ideas. Yeah, it can definitely be challenging with a longer process. Not to sound like a broken record, but definitely don't feel like you have to be alone with that. Schedule an appointment, talk to us, talk to your friends, just, honestly, the approach that Marilee suggested of scattering it on the floor and looking at all these different pieces. Another thing that might be helpful is creating a reverse outline. So looking at each paragraph and thinking, what is this accomplishing? What is it building toward? And noting in the margins, like how it's building toward the larger point you're making in that section. And then you might notice that you start writing really similar things in the margins about paragraphs that are really far apart. So you might be able to see how things that you didn't understand were connected are actually connected in ways you couldn't see before, and be able to reorganize.
Yes,
Also
I like
love,
to do the writing in the margins and then cut it up and then move it around. So you have your kind of Franken paper, and then you'll see that certain parts are stronger than others that say similar things. And I think too, part of this is signposting in your project, which is a later stage where there is some necessary repetition that needs to happen, but it's kind of complicated when you're putting something together, what those kinds of pieces will look like.
and I also agree with Tabitha's point in the chat about doing a brain dump. Absolutely. Yeah, it's easier to work with your ideas when they're actually down on the paper than it is when they're just still in your head. You can't really move it around if it's in your head. So even if you feel like it's imperfect, you're not saying it as well as you want to say it, just put it down. This is why we talk so much about the writing process, right? Because if you're just getting your idea down, so you can figure out where it goes and what it builds toward. It doesn't need to be like structurally perfect or expressed the best way yet. Like, it's
My friend
totally okay.
Michelle calls this blawing on the page, like blah, 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 like just get your ideas out and then you can make them pretty and, make more sense later.
Right. Yeah, if you give yourself grace, like if you don't place value judgments on yourself as a writer based on every sentence that leaves your fingertips before you've had a chance to revise or edit or think deeply about it, then I think you'll have an easier time with the whole process. Anyone have any more thoughts or any like tips and tricks that you might want to share more broadly?
What kind of advice, especially this goes maybe towards the people that are genuinely so close to the beginning stages of thesis writing, if they have an idea but they don't feel like they're struggling with the idea development or the confidence in their idea, what advice would you give to a student in that regard?
Write it down, even if you're not confident in it. Write it down, and if you can ask somebody who like is on your committee about things that you can read that would give you a better understanding of the thing you're trying to express.
I highly recommend reading other thesis projects in your field. So especially things are so accessible now. So ProQuest has all of the ones from IUPUI from the past decade or two. And so you can also ask your thesis advisor about projects that they remember that might be helpful, right? So former students that have written on similar topics. And so you can look at actual thesis projects because it is sort of a weird genre. It's not a genre you're going to write in a lot. And so it's helpful to really look at models, and those models can help you not only see structure that's going to be really helpful, they can also show you that, look, like I can write this, it can be less daunting. So it shouldn't be too scary then. So you can go into that and know that you're going to write your own version of this and that only you can do that. So trying to have some confidence around being the person who can write one of these in a different way.
Another thing that's been helpful is Marilee is the person overseeing my thesis, full transparency there. She has me do weekly reflections. So low stakes reflective writing that lets me think through the things that I've read and how they connect to each other. So something that might start as a very loose idea can over time develop into something bigger that you're more confident in. So low stakes reflective writing could be a great way to unlock access to ideas and connections that you didn't know you could make.
And then talking it through again. So like have one of your friends interview you about your thesis ideas and record the conversation. That can help too.
I love that idea. I think sometimes verbally expressing things helps us process very well. Definitely. Thank you so much for those suggestions.
Thank you. I think it was useful for a lot of people to hear.
Does
So we
anyone
ju-
have, oh,
Go ahead.
my apologies. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know we only have a few minutes left and we know that you all are very busy and have a lot on your plate. So we just had a few programs to remind you about. And I see Tabitha also, Dr. Hardy just posted a link to important forms and guidance that will be useful to you in the process, to make sure to check that out. But we do have the Navigating Graduate Writing workshop series coming up next week is the first version of the first what's the word? The first time we're doing it this semester. But we do have a few options for folks. So I know we have a slide about it somewhere. So
Yeah,
this
we
is a
do.
2-part workshop series where the first half is more around managing expectations around writing and helping you draw boundaries and things like that. And then the second part is more focused on high stakes writing. So kind of getting into the writing portions of things. So these are going to be via Zoom, and the first ones are going to be run next Friday. And the first half will be from 10 to noon. And the second half will be from 1 to 3. You can sign up for one or both. So, and we do have other options if this is not a time in the semester that's going to work as well for you. So do consider those. And then our Write on Site programming, both the Right Place, which is happening in our Kavanaugh location, and our Right Space, which is happening online, are starting next week. So we have options on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So do feel free to check that out. There's more information on our website with the appropriate links and all of that, and places to register for things that need that. So do check that out. And of course, our website is also where you go to make a one-to-one appointment, which we offer in person in our library location and online as well. So please do check that out. And Nathan's going to sum up our final thoughts.
Yes. So in summary, if you have questions about your writing, about writing in general, or even if you just think talking about it would help, please do make an appointment with us. Some of the best, most generative appointments that I've had have been with people who didn't have writing that they wanted to bring in. They just wanted to talk about note-taking strategies or how to approach a larger project or talking through something they were uncertain about in writing. So definitely, if your question is, should I come to the Writing Center? The answer is probably yes. Know what your commitments and priorities are and set goals, but also, especially if you're at the beginning stages of your thesis, give yourself space to adjust your goals as you learn more about how you function as a writer. The writing process workshop that we've mentioned that we're doing, definitely a great place to start in terms of knowing how to readjust your goals. Finally, writing is hard and it's messy and it's not natural. There's no such thing as a bad writer, because writing is a skill that is developed through doing more of it, and you're going to do a lot of it writing a thesis. So it's difficult for everyone. You're not alone in it either. Okay. Feel free to follow us. Please do follow us on social media. We post a lot about like breaks in the semester, about events that we're having, observations about writing, resources. So please do follow us. Okay.
And thank you to our sponsors.
Yes, thank you. Very happy to be here. And thank all of you for coming today.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate all the information. I hope you guys do and are very encouraged to visit them in the University Writing Center. I know I am, and I can't wait to come in and maybe work on further developing a direction for my thesis and organizing my thoughts. So I really appreciate all of your information and coming to speak and talk to us with us today.
Thanks for having us. It's a lot of fun. We like to talk about writing. That's another thing we can do. We can just be cheerleaders.
Yes.
Sometimes you just need a boost and we can get excited alongside you.